Welcome to another episode of The Cloud Gambit. With me is my always on co host, Yvonne Sharp. How are you doing today, Yvonne?
Hello, hello. We decided we'd take a bit and just have a conversation between the two of us about all that's going on in the tech world. It's been a while since we've done that, and I think the first time since we've hopped over on the Packet Pushers Network. So we didn't want to let this little somewhat quarterly tradition go of us just rambling a bit about all that's going on in the world.
Yeah, the things that we think are insightful, maybe a little crazy, maybe, just, hey, what's going on in the space that we work in regularly. So, but first, did you have a good weekend? How was the weekend?
How was the weekend? It was a good weekend, yeah. It was it was the tail end of fall break for our crew, which means we had fewer kid activities. And so we spent a lot of time just either at home or doing simple basic stuff, which was nice. We didn't have to get up early for a soccer game. We didn't have to drive a couple hours to a band competition. And so it was kind of a nice reprieve in the middle of a very busy fall season with two kids that have got to be delivered in lots of different places.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I had of course, a hockey tournament. I was up at 5 a.m. on Saturday morning, taping sticks, getting things ready, and off to the races. It was always fun. Always fun. It's a lot of work, but it's fun seeing some of these kids as they get they go from 8U to like 10U to 12U. Just the massive like how much of a difference 1 year makes with how they just their maturity, how they perform, how they interact with adults, their skill level, just everything. It's pretty amazing to see,
I
even to
love
the
to
point of
watch.
like, yeah, some of them like tying their own skates now, which is really nice when they get to that point, so you don't have to do it.
I love to watch their strategic thinking develop, right? My little guy's playing soccer, and when they first start playing, everybody just runs for the ball. And then you can start watching them thinking about, okay, if so and so's over here, I need to be over there so that I can, make a move if this happens. And it's fun to watch all those little strategy brains develop. So that's been really fun with my little guy.
Yeah, it is. It's great going from just chasing the ball or the puck or whatever around to try to get there to actually like, hey, we're going to use this field or we're going to use this ice and spread out and play some positions and try to win a game. It's really fun.
It is. It
But
is.
yeah, I guess out of the gate, I guess I can start us out. I thought this was interesting at first, and then I was like, well, it's kind of like business as usual. So, um, you know, speaking of, I guess, eye popping valuations that make you wonder, are we in a bubble or it's just this is the new real life or what is going on? But a company called N8N, in like network, number eight in like network, which is a Berlin based workflow automation startup, kind of like that higher level process automation, kind of I guess think of like Zapier as a competitor maybe. They just raised notes 180 million, yeah, 180 million in Series C funding, totaling 240 million at a 2.5 billion valuation. Now, I think all of us at this point should know that valuations are not tied to current profits. Um, just talking reality here, this is especially true in the midst of a hype cycle like the AI hype cycle that we find ourselves in right now. Um, where these multiples would just appear on the surface to be extremely inflated based on, I guess, hype and uh, fear of missing out, FOMO. I don't know, and maybe all other stuff as well. But for N8N in particular, like, wow, that's pretty crazy. This, I think, if I'm looking at these, I should have done some math before the call. But if you take the 40 million ARR and the 2.3 billion, the pre-money valuation. Um, that's I think in the ballpark of like a 60x AR multiple. So if you do want to zoom out, it does seem inflated at first, but like when you zoom out and you look at like other examples in this space, it's kind of like where it doesn't seem out of the ordinary because this is just seems like the new normal for AI type things. So what do you think of on? Is it a bubble?
I bubble's a strong word. Um, I I really don't know. There are like, I wouldn't be surprised if sometime in the next year we see a radical, drop in stocks, especially related to AI. I think if there is, that will have an impact on the larger market. These things are for the layperson, which I consider myself when it comes to company valuations and stocks and predictions and all that. They're nearly impossible. Even the experts get it wrong most of the time. Some experts are even known for being wrong. At the same time, like, I think at the very least, we are still near the top of the peak of the hype cycle. People are still super excited about AI. It's probably, 1997, 98 of where we were when, just ideologically, when the internet was really taking off. You went through this, and I lived through that period, right? I remember the optimism and the information sharing that, you know, was there when I first discovered web browsing and all those things in 94, 95, 96 in the university setting. And then sort of the despair that a lot of techno folks felt as every company started getting a domain name and folks started running ads and everything started to be commercialized, and then it became a big business. And then that's when, all these valuations took off and we ended up with a big bubble. I don't know that, we're headed toward a bubble. I will say, like, we cannot continue at this pace. Like, the pace is unsustainable. At some point, all these aspirations are gonna have to turn into revenue, and the question is, are they gonna turn into revenue quickly enough to avoid a huge drop or not? And that, I think, just it remains to be seen. We don't know yet.
Yeah, I mean, common sense dictates that hey, if there's no ROI and things aren't panning out, that VCs and otherwise are not going to pump as much money in, which means you're going to have less companies coming to market or strictly AI companies, and then it'll maybe correct a little bit. But yeah,
But I understand the impetus, and I understand, why VCs are doing what they're doing. Also, there's been some really interesting conversations. I believe, I heard it on the All In podcast, just about, um, at this point, VC may be overcapitalized. In other words, there's more money than there are good ideas. Um, is how I would summarize it. Like, or great founders. There's more money than there are great founders, and I think that will have to sort itself out eventually too. And a lot of the latecomers to the game are the ones that are going to be hit hard by that. Like, oh, hey, like these VCs, these people have been making money for hand over fist for a few decades. I want in on that. Well, it might be too late for some folks, especially if they don't have the sophistication. So it's an interesting time. It's a great time to be a founder with a great idea. Um, if you need, cash, but but that cash, you there is such a thing as too much, right? Because the more cash you get, the higher the expectations are, the quicker you've got to deliver, the more your investors want a return on their investment, and they don't want 5x or even 10x. They can get that in the S&P. They want 20x, 30x, and 30x $180 million is a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, those are all great points. And you're right. The pressure. So you have like maybe new investors coming in on a given round. That means a lot of times your big investors they're going to have a representative on your board. It it can be company changing. It can change the culture because there can be a lot of pressure because hey, you have this big influx in capital and now hey, you've got to sell because next year, we want to be more than double ARR. We want to just, hit this thing out of the park. Hire salespeople, pressure, pressure, pressure. You've got really high numbers to meet. And yeah, it can be stressful, I'd imagine. Um, I guess next up, or at least I thought this was really interesting anyhow, but OpenAI had their uh,
Dev Day.
Dev Day. Yes, Dev Day. Um, and so it's like Christmas came early for some AI super fans out there. So they unveiled this brand new uh, software development kit, or SDK for apps, which is basically a toolkit that lets developers build these customized applications. Of course, powered by their AI models. Making things, I guess, easier or seamless, if you want to use marketing terms, with um, just kind of minimizing friction. And get this. So I thought this was pretty crazy. My notes. There we go. So, um, ChatGPT has hit 800 million weekly active users. 800 million. A lot of which are not even technical people in the slightest. They're moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas. And I mean, that to me, that's not just growth. That's kind of like, I don't know what the right word would be, like cultural phenomenon numbers in a sense, showing that, AI is kind of weaving itself into that everyday life in some way or another. So, what do you think about that, Yvonne?
I've often wondered, um, what is the AI experience for the average human that is not I deeply mired in the tech industry, right? And we were talking a little bit about this before we recorded. I saw a tweet from John Capobianco earlier in the week, and where he said, "I'm on what I call my flying saucer tour, where I visit small and medium-sized groups of people around the world talking about artificial intelligence and MCPs and AI agents, only to be stared at like a dog who's been shown a card trick." Um, and then later on, he comments, "What is this guy talking about?" And I think so. I don't know that I trust my average guy intuition, but I do think um, there are lots of folks. I think young people are using it a ton because everything's new to them. So of course they're going to try it out. And I think it is world changing. And I've been saying this forever, we still just don't know how. Um, and I think the thing that we've not settled on yet is the revenue model. Um, I was listening, interestingly enough, a colleague pointed out the Acquired podcast to me, and they've done a series of 3 two-hour long shows on Google, and I just finished the first one. And so I'm fresh off listening this weekend to this story of the founding of Google and how Larry and Sergey were very committed to search and making the world's information universally accessible. Um, and also, it took they knew that they had the growth, but it took a bit to work out the revenue model. Again, that's where we are, especially with organizations like OpenAI. I think with Google, that path's a little clearer because they've got 25 years of experience monetizing information and search and all those things. But yeah, there's still a lot to be worked out with the revenue model, and yeah, surely with 800 million active users, OpenAI will figure that out. But I don't think we know what that looks like yet. Um, I I wonder if it will actually be subscription services. I think Netflix has shown us that there's a boundary to what that looks like, when you do subscription only without advertising. I mean, my maxim is that people are always willing to pay more for access to eyeballs than the eyeballs are willing to pay for content. So, we'll have to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, those are great points. I think it's interesting too. Like, I wonder how many of those numbers are, or how many of those users are. I mean, I wonder if it's counting business as well, or if it's just, is it B2C, B2B? Is it both? Is it all? Like, what does that even look like? Because the consumer, your average everyday person, is of course not going to be using an API or building an application. They're just going to be asking basic questions or helping sort some things or maybe find and replace stuff. But yeah, the subscription model thing is interesting because a lot of the companies that provide, maybe if you think of, I guess the coding assistants might be a good example. So you basically buy tokens. You buy like packages of tokens and stuff, and then you have some of them like Claude Code. You basically have a subscription, and like when you hit like a certain limit for a certain model, it'll just nerf you and take you down to the a cheaper model that requires less tokens, and then down as you use it more. So there's different ways, but again, how do you calculate the ROI of a token and then all the context around it? It
Well,
seems impossible to me.
still a very developer centric use case, right? And I think like and I think organizations will pay a lot of and it's nothing to sneeze at from a business model standpoint. Like if you're talking about, developer productivity and being able to build and prototype faster, I think the death of the software engineer has been incredibly overhyped. I do think the job's going to change, just like the jobs for accountants changed when there became spreadsheets and you weren't managing big old ledgers anymore. Like I think there are going to be that class of changes. Um, but yeah, that's still a very techno centric use case, right? And business model. And I wonder if that's where it stays or if it grows into more everyday, every man kind of every person use cases, I should say.
Yeah, and I think if you look back to, you really hit the nail on the head with the, death of the software engineer being extremely grossly over exaggerated because when you look back, it's just always, this would annoy me when because I'd see this stuff popping up everywhere, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the places where you'd have these opportunistic folks that would come and build content like, hey, I vibe coded this app in 2 hours that is making me $1 million in revenue a month or something outlandish. Like, really? Did you do that? And then they have all these views, all this engagement. And then really what it comes down to is they were looking for an opportunity to get views and engagement. That's the new thing. And there was little to no meat on the bone there. And you still have a lot of that stuff rolling around. And that's why it's important to educate yourself if you're in this space, if you work in tech and you need to know kind of base level how these things work a little bit because they cross all verticals in tech. They cross software engineering, network engineering, compute, all the places. Everything's kind of impacted by this. So it's really important to be able to use your brain and understand what's fact and what's fiction, I guess.
When I think it was Eric Schmidt talking about AI and how it's a very horizontal technology. In other words, it's not that it can be applied really in every industry, in every use case across the board. I believe that is true. The question is, can it be monetized in that way? I think some smart person's gonna figure that out. Some smart organization's gonna figure that piece out. But I still everybody that I hear talking about, um, accelerating developer productivity with AI, developers. They've already got a basic skill set and understand the tooling and have a developer mindset, right? So I think it remains to be seen whether a completely untrained technology noob could come to AI and build a robust, scalable app with AI alone. I'm much more dubious of that happening in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
A lot of stuff. I'll tell you what. After I haven't been working in tech as long as you, but I've put in some time, and this seems just so different than any of these other call 'em bubbles or overhyped things that I've gone through. Anyway, this seems different. It's almost anxiety inducing in some way because things like in the past you build up your chops, like you learn a trade, like you learn some things, and it changes because we work in tech, like you have to keep upskilled, but this is like changing like so incredibly fast. It's hard to keep up with anything, and once you think you know something, things just, the goalposts kind of move a little bit. So I can't imagine being a younger, just a maybe like straight out of college, a super young person that's coming in, like the confusion that they must have as far as like, what do I need to learn? Like, what is important? I have this list of 100 things. How do I pick the top five? Because when I came up in tech, it was very clear you didn't have all these options, you didn't have all these tools, and it was more about fundamentals at the end of the day. And there just wasn't so many options everywhere. I can't imagine what it would be like.
But so for me, I kind of wrapped up my education in the late 90s. And there wasn't a roadmap, right? If you wanted to do internet networking technical stuff, there weren't. I mean, there were computer science programs in college, but there was nothing to learn how to deploy infrastructure, how to deploy resilient infrastructure. There were certification programs, but they weren't what they became a decade later. And so there's part of me that's like for the 20 something, like person in their early 20s that's AI curious, like it's fabulous. Like there's nothing but opportunity ahead of them, right? And they will get to build and grow an industry from scratch and learn when things are simpler. And so, I look at that and like I said, for the folks that are AI curious, like there's nothing but opportunity ahead of them. That's how I see that. So some of it's in how you look at it. You and I were talking, I don't know, last week about, and this is an imperfect analogy, but folks in networking who forever were incredibly resistant of automation, right? Like, I'm a network engineer. I don't need to learn to code. Like Python is not for me. And we have seen over time those mentalities shift because they've had to. And what I would say is that it is really important for everybody to understand and be forward thinking about how the technology is going to change how you work today, because it will. Um, with all the question marks out there, like somebody's going to figure that out, and you might as well be on the front end of that curve and not the back end, and trying to figure out learning what everybody else has already discovered, and then playing catch up. Like it's it's a year to 5 years difference in time, and it could have that lapse could have a dramatic impact on your career trajectory.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Um, I guess on to the next thing that I had anyway. I guess the infrastructure, all this stuff we're talking about, it's, as it were, there's actually hardware that's required, a lot of hardware and a lot of power required to build all these things. So I guess moving over to the infrastructure side of the house, the real heavy lifting, is happening behind the scenes. So Meta in particular, uh, it's so funny. I have like paper notes these days. I have so much notes everywhere. My OneNote's full, my calendar's full, all these things are full. Yeah, the place that I look for the important stuff now is paper notes again on my desk. It's
Yeah.
wow, we've come full circle. But
Yes, we have.
um, Meta has committed 600 billion through 2028 on U.S. infrastructure projects. With it, obviously, there's going to be a huge focus on building out, data centers to accommodate the explosion of AI things. But this isn't just Meta. You see I mean, I don't have any numbers from the other big players out there, but investments are popping up globally from cloud providers, obviously, to chip manufacturers to everyone's trying to race to build that digital digital backbone of the future, as it were. So 600 billion, Yvonne. I want to know how many Ferraris that is. Has anybody calculated those numbers? How many Ferraris can I get with 600 billion? I would love to know because that's a lot of cash.
You
What do you
could
think?
ask AI. I don't know that it would do the math right, but, um, yeah, it's a lot, and I think when we're talking about, the economics of AI, like that's are we gonna be able to generate revenue enough to cover the cost of all this compute that we're building out? I think we will. I think we've proved that. The industry's proved that. The more interesting conversation to me is about power infrastructure, the cost of power for the average user, and are we going to be able to keep up and not only power and fuel these data centers, all this compute that we need, also provide affordable power to all of us who really want our air conditioning to work in the summer and the heat to work in the winter and like to keep our lights on and those sorts of things. I think there are major infrastructure challenges in the U.S. and they aren't as much silicon based as they are electron based. And can we generate the power? I'm hopeful that a significant portion of that $600 billion is earmarked toward power infrastructure. Ultimately, I think the hyperscalers are going to have to take matters into their own hands with power generation and not rely on public infrastructure to make it work. I think that's where we're headed because I just don't think public infrastructure is going to move fast enough to meet the demand.
I don't know if they can rely on it, or else they're just not going to grow.
Yep.
Because you're going to get into the problem of impacting everyone else by just having too much requirements there, too much power demand, too much power draw, and what is that going to do to prices? And who knows? There's just so much. Um, I guess nuclear it is. We'll see though. Uh, and it's just kind of crazy too, because even where we live, there's data centers going in Indiana, southern Indiana now, Kentucky, like AWS, Meta. They're throwing data centers everywhere. And that's one thing I'm just thinking about in my head is I don't want to live in. You think of these future dystopian, just mist, the sun doesn't look right anymore, and there's just this data center in wasteland. We don't want to get there and then be okay, now we got enough compute to understand how we can lower the carbon footprint or whatever. We can ask AI and it's going to figure it out for us. And you see that especially now because everybody's, Meta launched, or not Meta, OpenAI launched their new Sora app, which you've probably seen these on social media at this point. They generate pretty stunning videos from text prompts. And I wonder how much of those GPUs are working on generating nothing videos for like social media. I wonder if it's probably not a way to understand that, but I bet it's a lot because that type of work with diffusion and whatnot is extremely compute intensive. So yeah, crazy times. Anyhow, you are presenting at AutoCon 4 coming up, Yvonne. Tell us
I
about it. Tell
am.
us, what is
Yeah,
your
so
talk going to be about?
I'll be in Austin. You'll be there as well. And a lot of the packet pushers folks will be in Austin in December. I'll look up the dates while I'm talking if you don't have them. Let me see. AutoCon 4 dates. When is it? November 19th through the 21st. I'll be speaking on the 20th that afternoon as part of the leadership track. And the title of my talk is Beyond the Code: People Centric Leadership for Technical Projects. So, we'll be talking about how do you get a group of people coordinated around a project to get things done. And believe it or not, when you look at project failure, it's typically not technology failures. It's always people, process, coordination, maybe what we call socio-technical systems that are failing. Not as much like, hey, we couldn't figure out how to make the thing work. Yeah, so we'll be talking about that in Austin in November, week or two before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and there is a list of incredible people that are going to be at this one. There's just so many talented professionals, some of which I kind of grew up reading their books. Just a lot of great technical talent. And when you take into account that there's a cap on how many folks can come and sign up and be there. So this makes the hallway track for this type of event incredible because you're walking down the hallway, you run into someone, you just start talking. You have a fantastic conversation, you learn. It's really incredible. I've really enjoyed these events so far. I've been to all of them. And I've been to all of them except Amsterdam. So they had one in Amsterdam, the first European event. So I didn't make that one, but they've all been just absolutely incredible. So
Yeah.
you're in for a treat. Looking
Yeah, it's a
forward to
great
the
lineup. So John Capobianco will be there, Chris Grundeman, Eric Cho,
Russ White.
yeah, Russ White.
A lot
Love
of good,
Russ.
a lot of good folks. Andy Laptev is going to be there too as well, sporting the
Yeah,
Nokia shirt now uh, on the vendor
fun
side.
stuff. He and Russ
Yep.
both wearing Nokia shirts.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, Russ moved over to
Yeah,
Nokia.
yeah.
So yeah,
All right.
small world.
So another thing we thought it would be interesting to touch on before we close out this one is, we've talked a lot very theoretically about AI. So let's talk practically. How are you using AI tools to either improve your workflows, reduce toil, all of that? What are you doing these days?
I would say at this point, most of the things I'm actually doing have been experimental and have not made it into my actual production life, if that's what you could call it. I don't know. But I have some really awesome stuff. Like even thinking about this podcast, how we do episodes. So I have like this whole workflow basically to where, we use Calendly and then I use webhooks with Calendly to pull all the data about the guest. I format a doc, I put everything in the doc, and I'm actually using Zapier's MCP server, which integrates with like the whole wealth of, the breadth and depth of like Google Drive, Google Calendar, and all these things. So you have all this data. And what I've come to find is really you can either use like so I use a combination of Claude's built-in prompting stuff, both in Claude Code and in Claude Desktop. But if you think of just variables and placeholders, so I can build a template for something like I do my own. I actually like to research. I mean, I guess I could just throw a guest into the LLM and say, "Hey, build a research report on this person." But I like try to do a little bit of my own research and formulate my own opinion, and then feed that into an LLM to see what it gives me back. as we research guests. But if you think about all of these things are very easily done with, you know, LLMs and MCP. And then you can begin to put together a workflow. You can have like a main prompt, or like think like your Claude MD file in your root directory. And then in each subdirectory, you have like your, okay, like I have these audio files because as part of my workflow, I use MCP and automation to actually pull down the audio files, rename them the way that I want them to be renamed in my folder scaffolding, and then the episode planning docs, and then pulling down the videos. So I have, I begin to get to the point to where I don't have to name folders anymore. I don't have to pull dates and keep dates in mind and, keep track of all this information in a spreadsheet. Like I have a cohesive thing that's broken down into smaller components. And then from that main prompt, I can say, hey, whenever X happens, do Y. And then that kicks off the next thing and then the next thing. So it's all very organized and almost event driven, I guess, at the end of the day. So that's just one use case that I've been hitting pretty hard. What about you, Yvonne?
Yeah, so in my day-to-day work life, of course, I'm a Googler, and so we're all Google Workspace. And I was actually just Googling to make sure all the features I'm going to talk about are available. But there are a couple things I've been using. One is there's a new capability built into Gmail called flows, where you can build a flow and say, "Hey, I want to either summarize my email or I want to do these things," and then you give it a prompt and then it does it. So for example, as a manager, I have tons of approvals that I have to do. And if you don't know me, email for me is more of an archive than it is a communication tool. Right. So I'm never going to be a zero inbox person. But what I have done is I've created some flows that say, okay, every day I want you to send me a chat message of all the approvals that I need to do that came into my email. So if there's an unread message in there that's an approval, I want you to tell me what it is. So it'll be like, hey, you've got this many expense approvals to do today, or you've got, this many, things that you've got to approve or take action on. Or, build me a task list from my email to help me understand what the incoming requests are to me. So I do all kinds of that kind of just toil reduction. I also get a chat message every day that's a summary of all the news. Like, give me a summary of all those things. So those are just some very basic, like, administrative tasks. I no longer, when I'm preparing talks, I no longer search for either clip art or any of that stuff. I typically, you can feed the built-in image generation tools, your color palette, like even give it specific hex codes if you want to, and say, hey, I want an image that represents this, that uses these colors, that fits with my template. And it'll give you options. And then you can, and once you do that a few times, it's way faster than searching for any of those kinds of tools. So those are just some basics. The other thing, I use the built-in meeting notes all the time, like all the time. And so it has changed um, how I attend meetings and how I think about that. So I use all the note-taking tools, and then, I have some other tasks that I have to do that involve, like, either, you're reviewing the work with somebody of work that they've done, and then you have to summarize that review and turn it around in some sort of a feedback form. Those kinds of things, like, AI is great at that, and it's not gonna get it perfect, it's gonna misunderstand some things, you've gotta double check it, but to be able to just reduce the toil of writing and of summarizing and of taking notes, and I've actually found it incredibly helpful. Post-meeting, you can't attend all of them. You get an AI summary of a meeting that you missed, you read through it, you're like, "Oh, this thing is interesting, I'm gonna reach out to that person about that." Right? And so, just for me, it's part of how I work at this point. Like, and I would get less done. I would be less efficient. And all of those sound like very boring things, but like it's the boring things we want to do less of, right? And so those are just a few examples for me.
So all of these, knowing how to use these tools can save you a lot of time too. Because I mean, I was just in New York and I was hanging out with Dwan Lightfoot from AWS, and I was like explaining my code prompting structure, and he's like, William, that's nice, but if you did this and then you did this, you're going to get better results. And what he was telling me was spot on. And I'm getting better results. But even like when I'm committing code, like I have a Claude Code has like these series of like Claude MD files where you have like a user space one that you basically have in like your home directory that's like global in scope for all the things you're working on. So like something you might want to put in that one might be like code comments, like concise and meaningful comments while being as brief as possible, or use like inline comments when appropriate to avoid cluttering code. That don't over explain simple concepts. Like these are things that you would maybe want to be applicable to all the things you write, or even uh, security 101, like never expose API keys in your outputs or passwords or sensitive data. Validate your inputs before you process. Sanitize your outputs when displaying like user centric data, all the way down to like Git commits. Like, do you use conventional commits? Yeah. Okay. So this is the format. These are the types. Um, are there breaking changes? We'll do this if there's breaking changes. So you have all these things that you can put there. And then as you go down at the project level, your prompting gets a little more granular based on the project. So you have a Claude MD file at the root of the project. And then if there's like sub modules or subcomponents, you have a Claude MD file in there. So kind of what that does is it gets you to the point to where um, you have kind of like failing for words here, like I guess like full code base awareness, an understanding of the project, and then you have all the context around how you work with that said project. So it makes things. I think we all know that LLMs are not deterministic by nature, but if you make all of these prompting things and you really organize things and clean things up, it saves you a lot of rework to have to reprompt to get the right results. And this is actually really hard when you think about you really got to sit down and understand what you're doing. And that's where it gets kind of, it was tricky for me because I do a lot of different things and like, okay, what do I put in the user space versus the project space versus this space or that space? And really not overdoing it, like starting small and then adding on new things into these prompting mechanisms to start getting closer to the results that you want. So
Well, I've
that's
done
been
that over
fun.
time as well, even, with because I have some document templates that sort of document how to prompt for summaries and things like that. And over time, there are a few phrases that for me I just find I don't know, irritating. In other words, I don't want you to ever say proven track record. So and so has a proven track record of blah blah. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so because I would never say that. And so you can build context around how you talk and how you want feedback presented. And a lot of times I will do, summarize this in bullet form or summarize this in 100 words or less, or, and then as the models evolve, you have to go in and change some things like include this, don't include that. But as the best way to do that is just to start with something simple, start playing with it, and you'll figure out how to refine it over time, and then collaborate with peers and watch how other folks are doing it, and they will have discovered things you have not. And over time, like, prompting is going to become less and less of a necessary skill. I think the tools are going to learn. um, what we mean without us having to do as much work on the front end. But yeah, if you're not using it, you need to be. I was stunned last week. I talked to a colleague who works for a tech company that everybody would know. And on all their corporate devices, the AI tools are blocked. I think I think that is a significant strategic mistake to not enable your people to use those tools and to be so risk averse that you're afraid of some sort of litigious compliance or some unknown problem that you're denying, frankly, your business the rights to grow and learn with these tools as they're developing. It's like the companies that still companies block like Google Docs or block Workspace or block, and I just think that's very, very myopic and short-sighted. Um,
The reason what that stems from, I think 9 out of 10 times is the fear from security for data exfiltration, which if you
yep,
don't do these things the right way, data exfiltration is going to happen. Folks will back up critical things to Google Drive and you will not know. It will be their personal Google Drive and you could have a problem. But the beautiful thing about all of this is there is a right way to do it where you get the value and you don't sit with you're not saddled with that level of risk. So instead of saying, "Hey, we know this is a thing and we're just going to not go back and maybe solve the root cause of being able to expose and allow our engineers or whatever to use these tools. We're just going to block them all by default and then maybe worry about it later on." It's worth, digging in and figuring out, hey, how can we do this safely and responsibly? So, because it's better for the teams, it's better for the business, it's better for accomplishing more with less, which is something I think every business wants to
well,
do.
and you send the message that this isn't meaningful to us or our business, and it is meaningful to every business, and every CIO, CTO should be figuring out how to enable their teams, at least um, a, a group of, and maybe you do a training, maybe you whitelist some folks, maybe, but you have to have a group of folks that are playing with the tools and figuring out how it works and makes sense for your business.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Pilot it out. Take like two or three of your high performers and, you know, let
Turn
them
them
use
loose.
in one of these safely and see what happens.
Yep.
Hey, start with one person, start somewhere, do something.
Yep.
So, yeah. I think that about covers everything I had
Yeah.
on the
Good
book.
chat.
What about you, Yvonne?
Yeah.
Hey,
All good. I've got some more travel this week. I'll be back home by the time folks hear this, but going to be in Chicago for a couple days, and then
ooh,
I think the next trip will be Austin for AutoCon in November. Hope to see some folks there.
looking forward to it. And thanks everybody for tuning in.